Let's go live to our political editor, Andrew Clennell. And Andrew, it's all about the minimum wage the last 24 hours.
Yes, Kieran, and were the wages comments yesterday another Albo misstep that Labor has decided to just run with? I think yes.
Does that mean you would support a wage hike of at least 5.1% just to keep up with inflation?
Absolutely.
The opposition leader stood by that answer today.
Workers who are paid $20.33 an hour to be paid $1 extra. That is what this debate is about. The question was, it went to, you don't want people to go backwards. Does that mean you would support a wage hike of 5% just to keep up with inflation? My answer was absolutely, and I stand by it. They're on $20.33 an hour. The cost of everything that they buy is going up, but their wages aren't. Scott Morrison says that that's okay.
Wage increases make inflation grow if they are too ambitious. Then you have to lift interest rates and you can also crash the economy. What Anthony Albanese is proposing here is the biggest rise to the minimum wage in 17 years. In the second last year of the Howard government, 2006, the minimum wage was increased by the Fair Work Commission by 5.6%. Of course, we're talking about 5.1% here. Scott Morrison today described Anthony Albanese as a loose unit, his words, after his comments on a minimum wage rise yesterday.
What we saw from Anthony Albanese yesterday was reckless, was incredibly reckless. And Mr Albanese showed yesterday that he is a complete loose unit on this stuff. He just runs off. He just runs off at the mouth. I mean, it's like he just unzips his head and he just lets everything fall on the table.
What imagery. Well, Scott Morrison is probably on some safe ground with this characterisation. After all, Albanese did fail to name the unemployment rate, cash rate, 6 points of his NDIS policy during the campaign, and now he seems to have shot from the hip on inflation and what he thinks the Fair Work Commission should do. It has been a challenge for the government to frame Anthony Albanese in the lead up to this election. They have tried each way elbow and they've tried the most left-wing Prime Minister since Federation. But now they have settled on something they believe has some effectiveness, that he, quote, hasn't thought things through, unquote.
You know, being in government means you have to actually solve problems, be able to think things through. Plans require careful consideration. They require thinking things through, design of your policy, thinking things through.
Why is that a good thing to do in the design of that scheme? Or didn't you just think it through? You think it through, Anthony, and that's the problem.
See, they just don't think through the policies. That's why you've got to be able to think things through. And that's what we see with Mr Albanese all the time. He doesn't think these things through.
Good compile. Certainly on the door knocks I've done in marginal seats, in 3 of the 4 seats, voters commented on the need for Albanese to brush up on detail. So this issue about Albanese's competence is resonating. The thing about this new policy, if you like, that Anthony Albanese appears to have to tie wages to inflation is that inflation is likely to hit 7% or higher this year. On that day last month where Anthony Albanese failed to name the unemployment rate, I asked him about the then inflation rate. He answered correctly, as you'll see in a second. But bear in mind, inflation is now 5.5% just a month later. What's the inflation rate?
The inflation rate is 3.5 and the wages rate is 2.3, which is why inflation is much higher than the cost of living.
Albanese was asked today then, should wages continue to rise by inflation if inflation continues to go up?
Increases should be tied to inflation because that's what you seem to be suggesting.
No, I'm not saying that. If the Fair Work Commission, which makes these decisions independently of government, makes that decision that people shouldn't get a real wage cut, would I welcome it? Absolutely.
But Mr Albanese, on that logic, you're suggesting that, OK, people right now are suffering, they're not seeing their wages increase. If there was an increase of 5.1%, you would welcome that. By that logic, if inflation goes up to 6%
no, that's not. That's not by that logic.
So is there risk politically in the government banging on about this Albanese wages issue? After all, They have tax cuts coming in 2 years, which give the highest income earners close to $200 a week in extra pay. We are talking about a $40 a week pay rise for the poorest paid, although it can flow on to other awards. And the government did put $8 billion in giveaways in a cost of living package in the budget. Doesn't all that have an inflationary effect? From the government point of view, Albanese is appealing to his base with his comments, but they think they are appealing to those who know there's a link between inflation and wages. As one Liberal source said to me, if you want consequence-free money, you were already voting for him. Maybe the problem, Kieran, is that most people do want consequence-free money. And we have seen that through the pandemic and beyond.
And the polling today, Andrew, what did you make of that? It's quite an ambitious project being undertaken by the YouGov organisation commissioned by News Corp.
We've had this YouGov poll in The Australian and other papers today, which suggests something we reported on Sunday Agenda a couple of weeks ago now, that Treasurer Josh Frydenberg could lose his seat of Kooyong. It's a small sample. The YouGov primary vote for Frydenberg is lower than the Liberal polling, I'm told, but it has him behind on a two-party preferred basis in the seat, 53 to 47. Our reporter Andrea Crothers asked Scott Morrison who would be Treasurer if the government won and Frydenberg lost his seat.
If you win government but Josh Frydenberg loses his seat, who will be the next Treasurer?
That is not something I'm speculating on because I know Josh will be returned.
But isn't it hypocritical that you attack Labor for not confirming who the Defence Minister will be, yet if the polls are accurate, Josh Frydenberg won't be Treasurer?
Well, you know my view about the polls. And Josh Frydenberg will be my Treasurer. I still don't know who Anthony Albanese's Defence Minister is going to be. I don't know who his Home Affairs Minister is going to be. And we're in
And we don't
the
know
middle.
who your next Treasurer could be.
Yes, it's Josh Frydenberg.
Now, it seems to me that if Morrison were to win the election but Frydenberg lose Kooyong, it is likely that the Liberal Party would attempt to find a safe seat, I'm saying maybe Menzies, and do a deal with the relevant MP to stand aside to get the Treasurer back in the Parliament. It's a bit trickier if the government loses and Frydenberg loses, then he would want to be opposition leader, but this would gift the job to Peter Dutton. Would Frydenberg have another tilt at Parliament then? Having said this, for some reason, on both sides of politics there is a view somehow Frydenberg will do a Houdini and win the seat. We'll be eagerly watching this contest next Saturday night, that's for sure. I understand The Australian will be publishing a wider range of results tomorrow, which should really give us an indication of how the government and opposition are faring in this election campaign. And I think The Australian is to be commended on commissioning this seat-by-seat major poll. Apparently it has been done with success in the UK, and although some of the individual seat figures may prove wrong, I'm sceptical about the Wentworth result, for example, the poll in its entirety should give us a good trend across the marginal seats, Kieran.
It will, yeah, we hope so. It's certainly very interesting for us political pundits. Andrew, thanks. We'll talk to you soon.